It was a cold, gray evening when she stepped out onto the streets. The wind cut through her thin coat, leaving her shivering as she pulled it closer around her. The city was alive with lights and sounds, but to her, it felt distant and harsh. People hurried past, carrying their warmth and laughter with them, oblivious to the small, quiet figure moving silently among them. She wasn't looking for attention. She was just looking for warmth. A little corner of the world that would let her breathe, if only for a few moments. She wandered down the streets, her shoes tapping lightly on the wet pavement. Her mind wandered too, filled with memories of better days, times when laughter had come more easily, when home had felt like home, and when she had felt safe. But those days felt like a distant dream now. She had left behind people and places she loved, searching for a fresh start, and somehow in this big, indifferent city, she had ended up feeling smaller than ever. As she walked, her eyes caught sight of a small building tucked between two larger ones. Its sign was worn, almost fading, but she could just make out the words, Community Center. Warm light spilled out through the windows, soft and golden. She paused for a moment, hesitant. She didn't know anyone here. She had no reason to go inside. And yet something about the glow, something about the quiet hum of life within called to her. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately. It was more than just the heat from the radiators or the cozy lights. It was the kind of warmth that seemed to wrap around you, soft and gentle, the kind that comes from being somewhere where people belong. She wasn't sure she belonged here, but for the first time that evening she felt her fingers stop trembling from the cold. The room was quiet but alive in its own way. A few people sat at tables quietly talking or reading. Others were at the far end, playing chess or sketching quietly. And then in the corner she saw it at an old piano. Its black paint was chipped in places, the keys slightly yellowed, but it looked inviting, almost magical in the soft light. She hesitated. She hadn't played in public for a long time. No one here knew her. Maybe it was safer to just leave, but something inside her stirred. It wasn't pride or ambition. It was something simpler, something more honest. She wanted to be heard. Not for fame, not for recognition, but just to let anyone know that she existed. She walked slowly toward the piano, her steps light, almost afraid she would shatter the fragile piece around her. She sat down and let her fingers hover above the keys, unsure at first, then slowly, carefully she pressed one key, then another. The first note trembled through the room, soft and uncertain. She closed her eyes. The music began to flow hesitantly at first, but then with more confidence. Each note was a small confession, a whisper of the thoughts and feelings she had carried alone for so long. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The music spoke for her. She played for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. The people in the room noticed her, some glancing over with curious expressions, some quietly leaving their tables to listen. There was a stillness in the room now, a quiet pause in life, as if the piano had created its own space, a bubble where nothing else mattered but the sound, the emotion and the presence of the person playing. And then she felt it. Someone else in the room, watching her. She hadn't realized she was not alone. At the edge of the room, standing quietly and motionless, was a man. He wasn't young, but there was a kind of quiet strength about him. He wore a simple coat, nothing fancy, yet he carried himself with a sense of authority. His eyes were fixed on her, not in judgment, but in attention. And in that moment she realized that someone was really listening, really hearing her. Her fingers faltered slightly. She had not expected anyone to notice, and now, feeling exposed, she wondered if she should stop. But the man didn't move, didn't speak. He simply watched, letting her music fill the space. And something about the steadiness of his gaze gave her courage. She pressed on, letting her fingers glide across the keys with more assurance, letting her emotions flow freely. She wasn't playing a song anyone knew. It wasn't meant to be perfect. Each note was a piece of her. Her longing, her loneliness, her quiet hope for something better. She didn't have words, but her music spoke them anyway. The man, still standing there, nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if he understood. The warmth of the room, the gentle light, and the presence of someone who truly listened created a sensation she had not felt in a long time. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she did not stop. The music became her voice, her companion, her comfort. She had come into the building looking for warmth, a small reprieve from the cold. and she had found it in a place she hadn't even known existed, in a connection she hadn't expected. The music eventually softened, each note lingering in the quiet room like a gentle echo. She lifted her hands from the keys, heart still racing. The man took a small step forward, clapping softly. The sound startled her at first, but then she realized it was applause, quiet but sincere. "That was beautiful," he said, his voice calm, gentle yet carrying weight. "Do you play often?" She shook her head, unsure how to answer. I used to. Not really for anyone else, just for myself." He smiled, a small warm smile that made her chest feel lighter. "Well, I'm glad you shared it. Your music. It has a way of reaching people. Sometimes that's what the world needs, a song that comes from the heart." She didn't know what to say. She felt shy, embarrassed, yet also seen. For the first time in a long time, she felt noticed. Not for who she was on the outside or for the things she had, but for what she could create, for what she could give. Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, looking around the room. "This is a place for people like you. People who need a moment of warmth, and people who can give something back with their talents. If you want, you could come by more often. Play, teach, share, whatever feels right." Her lips curved into a tentative smile. She had not expected kindness tonight. She had not expected anyone to notice her, much less encourage her. Yet here it was, an open door, a warm room, and someone who believed she had something to offer. She left the community center that night with a strange lightness in her chest. The city outside was still cold and harsh, but she didn't feel quite as small anymore. Somewhere inside, a seed had been planted, a hope that maybe, just maybe, there were places where she could belong, and people who would truly listen, and she knew, without fully understanding how or why, that she would return. She would return not just for warmth, but to share the music that had kept her company in the quiet, lonely hours. She was no longer just a stranger in the city. She was someone with a song, and someone had heard it. The next evening, the city was quieter than before. Snow had begun to fall lightly, dusting the streets in white, softening the harsh edges of buildings and streetlights. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself and stepped out into the cold, her thoughts still lingering on the warmth of the community center from the night before. She hadn't stopped thinking about it. Not the heat, not even the lights, but the music. That small, quiet corner, the piano, and the man who had listened to her without judgment. She hesitated at the door of the center, her fingers brushing the handle. For a moment she considered walking away. What if she wasn't ready? What if she embarrassed herself? But the memory of the piano keys beneath her fingers, the feel of the music flowing from her hands, and the look in the man's eyes gave her courage. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The room was alive with quiet activity again. People were working on small projects, chatting softly or reading. The familiar warmth welcomed her, and she felt a small sense of relief settle over her. She made her way to the piano, noticing the director already standing nearby, a small smile on his face. "I wondered if you'd come back," he said, his tone gentle, without pressure. "I think you might have something worth sharing." Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not ones that felt sincere. I don't know," she said quietly. "I just play sometimes." "That's exactly why you should," he replied. "The world doesn't need perfection. It needs honesty. And what you play, it's honest." She glanced down at the keys, hesitant. She had played for herself before, but the idea of playing with someone watching her, really listening, made her heart race. Yet somehow she felt a pull, a quiet insistence that tonight she should play again. She placed her fingers on the keys, softly at first. The notes came out tentative, like whispers. The director stood a few feet away, watching but not pressing. He didn't speak, didn't move, just let her find her rhythm. Slowly, her confidence grew, and the music became richer, fuller. Each note was a story of loneliness, of hope, of longing for warmth and connection. People in the room began to notice. Heads turned, eyes widened. Some paused their conversations or tasks to listen. The director's expression changed subtly. He leaned forward, as if absorbing every note, every emotion carried by her hands. When she finished the first song, she looked up, startled. The room was quiet, but no longer empty. Everyone seemed touched. And then the director stepped forward. "That was beautiful," he said simply. "Would you play one more? A full piece from start to finish?" Her heart skipped a beat. She had not expected that. She swallowed hard. I don't know if I can, she admitted. Her voice was barely audible. You can, he said firmly but kindly. You've done it before. You just need to trust yourself again. I promise we're listening. You're not alone here. Something inside her shifted. The warmth she had felt yesterday wasn't just physical anymore. It was trust. Someone believed in her, and for the first time in a long time, she believed in herself. At least a little. She nodded, taking a deep breath, and let her fingers hover above the keys. The first note of the second song filled the room. It was different from the first, deeper, more emotional. She wasn't playing just for herself anymore. She was playing for the people who had stopped to listen, for the director who had offered her encouragement, for the quiet hope inside herself that maybe she could belong somewhere. The music flowed, weaving through the room like a gentle river. The director's eyes softened as he listened. He wasn't just hearing notes. He was hearing the story behind them. He could see her journey in every movement of her fingers, in every hesitation, in every rise and fall of the melody. This wasn't just talent. This was heart. Other people began to respond too. A few smiled softly. Some whispered to each other, and one older man even wiped a tear from his eye. It wasn't a loud or dramatic reaction, but it was real. They were connecting with her, without her saying a word. Halfway through, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Courage. The music no longer trembled under her fingers. It soared. She leaned into it, letting every note express what words could not. She had come to the community center looking for warmth, a small reprieve from the cold. Now she realized she was giving warmth back, warmth that the people in the room could feel, even if they didn't fully understand why. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. It wasn't awkward. It was reverent. People just sat there letting the music linger, absorbing it. Then slowly applause began, gentle at first, then growing. The director clapped the loudest, but even that was quiet compared to the pride in his eyes. You see, he said, walking closer. That was incredible. You've always had this. You just needed someone to notice, someone to remind you that your gift matters. She felt tears prick her eyes, not from embarrassment, but from relief, from joy, from recognition. For so long she had hidden her music, thinking it was small, unimportant, unworthy of attention. Now she saw that it had power, not just over the notes themselves, but over people's hearts. You really think I could do more? She asked softly, her voice trembling. I don't just think it, he replied, smiling. I know it. There's something in your music that touches people. And there's something in you that's ready to share it. Don't let fear stop you, her mind raced. She had always wanted to make a difference, to feel connected, to be seen. And here, in a small, warm room in a quiet corner of the city, she had found someone who believed she could, someone who offered her a chance, not just to play, but to grow, to shine, to become more than she had ever imagined. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She felt seen, heard, and valued. She felt a spark of hope, a small but steady flame that promised that maybe, just maybe, things could change. As she left the community center that night, the snow falling lightly around her, she held her head a little higher. The streets still seemed cold, still seemed endless, but she carried a warmth inside her now. It wasn't just the warmth of a room or a coat. It was the warmth of connection, of recognition, of possibility. And she knew, without fully understanding how or why or what would happen next, that her music had started something. It had reached someone important. It had changed something, even if just a little. And she could feel it. The journey had only just begun. The days after that night at the community center were different. She woke up with a strange lightness, a quiet excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. The memory of the piano, the music, and the encouraging words of the director stayed with her like a soft melody in her mind. Every step she took felt a little lighter, every breath a little warmer. It was as if the cold and loneliness of the city had loosened their grip just a little. She returned to the community center the next day, not just out of habit, but because she wanted to play again. The director was there, as if waiting for her, and greeted her with the same calm smile. I thought you might come back, he said. I have something to tell you. There's a small recital happening next week. It's nothing big, just a chance for the people here to share their skills. I think you should play. Her stomach tightened. A recital, a crowd? The idea of performing for anyone beyond the quiet room of the center made her nervous. What if she messed up? What if no one liked her music? What if she embarrassed herself? Seeing her hesitation, the director said gently, "I understand your fear, but this is just a small step. It's not about being perfect. It's about sharing a piece of yourself. You've already touched people with your music. This is just another chance to do that," she nodded slowly. His words were kind, but still the fear inside her didn't vanish. And yet somewhere deep down a spark of courage flickered. Maybe she could try. Maybe this was the moment to take a small step forward. For the next few days she practiced tirelessly. She arrived at the center early, her fingers gliding over the keys, letting the music flow freely. Sometimes she stumbled. Sometimes the notes didn't come out exactly as she imagined, but each time she tried again. The director watched quietly, offering guidance only when she asked. "You're improving," he said one afternoon, leaning on the piano. "But remember, it's not just about hitting the right notes. It's about letting people feel what you feel," she nodded. That idea stayed with her. Music wasn't just sound. It was emotion. It was a story without words, a language that could touch hearts if only it was played with honesty. She thought about the people who had listened the first time she played, how they had paused, how their faces had softened, how some had even been moved to tears. She wanted to do that again. She wanted to reach people, to make them feel warmth the way she had felt warmth for the first time in months. The day of the recital arrived. The community center was buzzing quietly with anticipation. Friends, neighbors, and a few strangers had gathered. Some were shyly holding programs, others were chatting softly. She felt her nerves twist in her stomach. She had never played in front of an audience this large. What if they didn't like her? What if she froze? The director appeared beside her and gave her a reassuring nod. "Just play from your heart. That's all anyone wants. You're ready." She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. When it was her turn, she walked to the piano, the spotlight soft but warm on her face. She took a seat, fingers hovering over the keys, and glanced at the audience. Faces looked back at her, curious, expectant, friendly. And then she thought of the cold streets outside, the loneliness she had carried, and the first time she had played in this center. She realized that all those moments had led to this opportunity to share herself, to create warmth. She pressed the first key. The note sounded out soft but clear. Slowly her confidence grew. The music swelled, filling the room with her story. It wasn't a complicated piece. There were no fast runs or dramatic flourishes. But each note carried emotion. Each pause held meaning. She was telling her story, her fears, her hope, her longing, without a single word. The audience leaned in. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Some smiled softly, recognizing the honesty and heart in her playing. And the director, standing quietly to the side, nodded slightly, pride shining in his eyes. As the song continued, she felt herself melt into the music. The nerves were still there, but they became part of the performance, part of the story she was telling. She no longer played for perfection. She played for connection. She played for warmth. And slowly, she realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. When the last note lingered in the air, the room stayed silent for a moment, caught in the echo of what she had shared. Then applause began, soft at first, then louder, more confident. People clapped, some cheered quietly, and a few even stood. Her heart swelled. She had done it. She had shared herself, truly shared herself, and the world had responded. The director approached her afterward. "See?" he said, his voice gentle but full of excitement. "You touched people. You really did. That's why we play music. That's why we share it." She felt tears pricking at her eyes, not from fear, not from embarrassment, but from joy, from relief, from the realization that she had found her place, even in a small way. She had started out looking for warmth, and now she had given it to others. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. I didn't know I could do this." "You always could," the director replied, smiling. "You just needed a chance and someone to notice. Don't stop now." Over the next few days, the community center became her second home. She played regularly, sometimes in front of small groups, sometimes just for herself, letting the music flow. People came to listen, and slowly she began to recognize familiar faces, friendly smiles, and nods of encouragement. She realized that she wasn't alone anymore. She had found a place where her music mattered, where she mattered. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Some days she felt unsure of herself. Some days the music didn't come easily. Some days the memories of loneliness crept back in, whispering doubts. Yet each time she returned to the piano, and each time she found the courage to play again. And each time the director reminded her quietly and patiently that what mattered wasn't perfection. It was honesty. It was heart. It was connection. One afternoon, as she played a particularly soft piece, the director spoke again. "Have you ever thought about performing outside the center?" he asked gently. "There are small events in the city. Nothing huge. Just a chance to share your music with more people. You might be surprised at how far your warmth can reach." She paused, fingers resting on the keys. The thought scared her. A bigger audience, strangers, expectations, it was overwhelming. And yet she felt a spark of excitement. Maybe this was the next step. Maybe this was where she could grow even more, where she could test herself and where she could see just how far her music could reach. She nodded slowly. "Maybe I could try." The director smiled, a proud and gentle smile. "That's all anyone can ask, just try. The rest will follow." And in that moment she realized that her music was no longer just a secret comfort. It was no longer just a way to keep herself warm on lonely nights. It was becoming a bridge to other people, to connection, to hope, and maybe even to a future she had never imagined. She left the center that evening with a lighter step. The snow had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the city lights. She walked slowly, savoring the quiet peace of the night, thinking of the music she had played, the applause she had heard, and the encouragement that had lifted her. For the first time in months she felt ready to face the world beyond the community center, ready to share her music in ways she had never dared to dream, and most of all, ready to believe in herself. A week later, the opportunity the director had hinted at arrived. It wasn't a huge concert or a big stage, but a small city event held in a cozy hall. Local artists, musicians, and performers were invited to share their work. The idea was simple: bring warmth, joy, and creativity to the people in attendance. For her, it was a step far beyond the safety of the community center, but she felt ready. The morning of the event, she woke with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Her fingers tingled at the thought of the piano keys she hadn't yet seen, the new room she hadn't yet entered, and the audience she hadn't yet faced. She knew it would be different from the center. Strangers, bigger space, more expectations. Her heart raced as she got ready, rehearsing the songs over and over in her mind, imagining the notes floating through the hall. When she arrived, she was struck by the size and energy of the space. The hall was small yet bright, filled with chairs for the audience, tables with decorations, and other performers warming up. Some were talking confidently to each other, laughing, preparing their instruments. She felt a pang of doubt. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe she wasn't ready. The director noticed her hesitation and came over. "Remember," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This is just another chance to share what's in your heart. People aren't expecting perfection. They just want to feel something real." She nodded, drawing in a deep breath. His words had become her anchor. They reminded her why she had started playing at the center in the first place, not for applause, not for recognition, but for connection. When it was her turn, she stepped toward the piano, the polished wood gleaming under the soft lights. The audience was seated, some chatting quietly, others waiting with expectant smiles. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat down, but she focused on the first note. The music began, soft and gentle, almost hesitant at first. Then as her fingers found their rhythm, the melody grew richer. She poured her emotions into every note. The loneliness she had once felt on cold streets, the warmth she had discovered at the community center, and the hope that had begun to bloom inside her. At first she noticed the polite smiles, the quiet attention, but then something changed. People began leaning forward in their seats, eyes softening, faces reflecting the story she was telling. One little girl clutched her mother's hand, mesmerized. An older woman closed her eyes, tapping her fingers gently on her lap, as if moving along with the rhythm of the song. And then it happened. The moment she realized her music could reach beyond herself. She saw people responding, not to perfection, but to honesty. The nervousness melted away, replaced by a calm focus. She was no longer just playing notes. She was sharing pieces of herself, pieces of her journey, pieces of her heart. But as the piece grew more complex, she hit a wrong note. Just one, small, seemingly insignificant, but her heart stumbled. The music faltered for a brief moment. She felt her breath catch, panic threatening to take over. What if the rest of the song fell apart? What if everyone noticed? Then she remembered the director's words. It's not about perfection. It's about honesty. She took a deep breath, let the mistake go, and continued. And as she played, she realized something incredible. The music didn't break. It flowed, it breathed, it spoke. People didn't care about the wrong note. They cared about the feeling, the story, the warmth she was offering. By the time she reached the final notes, her hands were steady, her heart full, and the room was completely silent, caught in the lingering echo of her music. Then slowly applause began. At first polite, then stronger, more confident, filling the room with appreciation. Some people stood, some smiled warmly, and the little girl clapped with pure joy. The director joined her afterward, his smile wide, eyes shining. "See what I mean?" he said softly. "You touched them, not because everything was perfect, but because you were honest, because you shared yourself. That's what matters most." She felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of pride, relief, and gratitude. She had taken a step into the wider world, and she had succeeded. She realized something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was continuing even when you were afraid. Courage was choosing to play, to act, to share, even when the outcome was uncertain. In the days that followed, she found herself thinking about the event constantly. She received kind words from strangers she had never met, compliments she hadn't expected, and even invitations from local community groups to perform again. Slowly, a sense of purpose began to grow inside her. Music wasn't just her comfort anymore. It was her gift, her way of reaching others, her voice in the world. Yet with new opportunities came new challenges. Not every performance was easy. Some days the nerves were stronger, the mistakes louder, and the doubts heavier. Some people didn't understand her music. Some didn't respond the way she hoped. And some days she questioned herself. Was she really good enough? Could she really share her music with the world beyond the center and the small hall? Each time, though, she returned to the piano. Each time she reminded herself why she had started. Not for applause, not for recognition, but for the warmth and connection that music could bring. Each time she learned something new about herself. She learned that mistakes were part of the journey. She learned that her voice mattered. She learned that courage came not from certainty, but from persistence. One chilly evening after a small but successful performance at a local cafe, the director spoke to her again. "You've grown so much in such a short time," he said. "But remember, this is just the beginning. There's a larger world out there waiting for your music. Don't be afraid to take bigger steps. You have something rare, a heart that speaks through music. Don't hide it." Her eyes widened. Bigger steps? The thought was exciting but terrifying. Could she really imagine performing for a larger audience, for people she didn't know, in places she had never been? The fear bubbled up inside her. And yet, underneath it, there was that familiar spark. The spark that had led her to the community center. The spark that had let her play her first song. The spark that had helped her reach people at the recital and city event. She nodded slowly. I think I can try," she said. The director smiled, a proud and patient smile. "That's all it takes. One step at a time. The world doesn't open all at once. But if you keep moving forward, your music will find its way." That night, as she walked home through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had started out simply seeking warmth, a small comfort against the cold, against loneliness. But now she carried something much greater: purpose, courage, and hope. She carried the knowledge that her music could reach beyond herself, that it could touch others, that it could create warmth in places she had never imagined. And most importantly, she carried the belief that she could keep going, keep growing, and keep sharing. She realized that every wrong note, every moment of doubt, every challenge was simply part of the journey. And with each step she would become stronger, more confident, and more capable of reaching the hearts of those who needed her music, perhaps even changing lives in ways she couldn't yet see. The weeks after her performance at the cafe passed quickly. Each day she played, practiced, and shared her music wherever she could: small community gatherings, local cafes, and occasional city events. The warmth she had sought so long, Ego now traveled with her, weaving into every note she played, touching people in ways she had only begun to understand. But even as she grew more confident, a bigger opportunity loomed. A local festival was coming to the city, one that drew crowds from all over. The director approached her one morning, excitement in his eyes. There's a stage at the festival, he said, leaning in slightly. It's bigger than anything you've done. People from across the city will be there, and I think you should play. Her heart raced. Bigger? A festival stage? Thousands of eyes watching? She felt a wave of fear crash over her. Could she really do it? Could her music reach that many people? The thought of making a mistake, of failing in front of so many, made her stomach twist. The director noticed her hesitation and spoke gently. I know it's intimidating, but remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being yourself. It's about sharing your story. You've done it before, here at the recital, at the cafe. You can do it again. She nodded, taking a deep breath. Somewhere inside her, that spark of courage flickered. The same spark that had brought her to the community center, that had led her to her first recital, that had pushed her to perform outside in front of strangers. That spark whispered, "You can do this." The day of the festival arrived. The city was alive with excitement, music, and laughter. People moved through the streets, stopping at stalls, enjoying performances, and discovering new artists. She arrived, early, her heart pounding as she saw the stage for the first time. It was larger than any she had played on before, the lights brighter, the audience far bigger. Backstage, she tried to calm herself. Her fingers felt heavy, her hands trembled slightly. She closed her eyes and remembered why she played. Not for fame, not for applause, but to share warmth, to reach people with her music. She thought of the cold nights she had endured, the loneliness she had carried, and the first time she had found comfort in the community center. She realized that all of it had led her to this moment. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage, the crowd stretching farther than she could see. She sat at the piano, her hands hovering over the keys, and took a deep breath. The first note rang out soft and tentative. But as she continued, the melody grew, stronger, richer, filled with emotion. The music carried her story, the struggle, the fear, the hope, the warmth she had found. And as the audience listened, something magical happened. People leaned in, absorbed by the honesty of her performance. Some closed their eyes, some smiled, some swayed gently with the rhythm. She realized that her music wasn't just sound. It was connection. It was reaching hearts she had never seen, touching lives she didn't even know existed. Halfway through, she hit a small, wrong note. For a brief moment, fear surged. But then she remembered all she had learned. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was continuing anyway. She let the note pass, continued playing, and poured even more heart into the music. The audience didn't falter, didn't notice. They simply listened, captivated. When the last note faded, silence filled the air for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause. Not just polite clapping, real, heartfelt appreciation. People cheered, some stood, some wiped tears from their eyes. She felt her chest swell with emotion, her heart pounding with pride and relief. She had done it. She had shared herself with the world, and the world had embraced her. Backstage, the director hugged her gently. "You see," he said softly. "This is your gift. Your music can reach far beyond anything you imagined. Keep sharing it." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never thought I could do this. I never imagined so many people would care about my music. You have something rare," the director replied. "A heart that speaks through music. Don't let it be hidden anymore." Over the next few months, her life began to change. Invitations to perform came from more places: schools, local festivals, small music events. Each time she felt the same mixture of nerves and excitement, the same fear of failure, but also the same spark of courage that had guided her from the very beginning. She learned to embrace the nerves, to let them fuel her performance rather than control it. But beyond the performances, something deeper had changed. She no longer felt alone. She had found a community, people who appreciated her music, who encouraged her, who reminded her of her own value. She had found a purpose, sharing warmth, hope, and connection through her gift. And most importantly, she had found herself, her courage, her voice, her heart. One quiet evening, after a particularly touching performance at a small charity event, she sat at the piano in her apartment. The keys felt familiar, comforting like old friends. She thought back to the nights she had wandered the cold streets searching for warmth, unsure of her place in the world. She realized how far she had come. From those lonely nights to the community center, from small recitals to the festival stage, her journey had been one of courage, persistence, and hope. She began to play, letting the music flow freely, not for an audience this time, but for herself. Each note carried memory, emotion, and gratitude. She smiled, realizing that she had become the warmth she had once sought. And as the music filled the room, she knew she would continue to share it with anyone who needed it, anywhere it could reach. In that moment, she understood the truth she had learned along the way. Courage isn't always loud, and success isn't always immediate. Sometimes it starts quietly, with a spark, a choice, a first note. And from there, it grows. One step, one song, one heart touched at a time. Her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more fears, more moments of doubt. But she no longer feared them. She had learned to trust herself, her music, and the quiet, persistent spark of courage that had carried her this far. And she knew no matter what, she would continue to play, to share, to connect, to bring warmth, not just to herself, but to the world. Because she had discovered something far greater than herself, the power of music to heal, to unite, and to remind people that even in the coldest, loneliest moments, warmth could always be found. And so she played, and she shared, and she lived, no longer searching for warmth because she had become it,